This presentation is going to be a wee bit different from the other ones because I'm not going to present a case study to you. I will try to enhance your skills with AnyLogic. But before we come to that, can anybody see who the two boys, who of them is myself? Is that really hard to tell? Is that really easy to tell? So the left one, the smaller one is me. The other one is my brother. Just note how we are really close, like we really try to be as far away from each other as possible while hugging. So while I was at that age, one day my teacher at school told me, or told us, today you can be creative, you can draw whatever you want. And I was like, cool, that's awesome. So my friends drew Mickey Mouse, and I thought I'm gonna draw a map of the world, but it's gonna be creative. So instead of the normal borders, or wiggly, my borders will be straight lines. So I came up with this Picasso-like map of the world. And I remember that to that day, so it seems like I must have been a map geek for quite a while by now. So this talk is gonna be about maps. It's basically an add-on to the talk we heard yesterday by Nikolai on the capabilities of maps in AnyLogic, but I'll extend to that. So maps are really cool. I really like maps. Anybody got an idea what this map is trying to tell us? Sorry? So you got 3 countries there, United States, I think it's Liberia and Africa, really small, and what is it, Thailand maybe? I don't know. These are the only countries in the world that use the empirical measurement system. So, you know, no judgment, it's just information, but it's trying to show you very powerfully a piece of information. So what if I told you that the moon is about the same size than the United States? That is like an interesting piece of information, but it's much more powerful if I show you a map of that. So that's overlaying the moon and the United States. So they pretty much have the same size. Have you got any Chinese? I assume we've got Chinese-speaking people in the audience. Anybody speaking Chinese back there? Cool. So the next map is showing Europe, but the country names are the literal translations from Chinese, apparently. So I live in Morrowland, and I work in Braveland, which is really cool. Not quite sure about very lucky soldiers. I assume if you're a soldier in Sweden, you're very lucky because you don't fight that much, I'd guess. Italy is meaning big profit. I mean, you couldn't make that up. That's brilliant, isn't it? So my point is maps are fun, maps are informative, maps are very powerful. So combining maps with our simulation approach is a very cool thing to do. And we heard a lot about what we can do with AnyLogic and maps yesterday, and it's really cool development. This talk will add to that. So in this talk, we're going to take a little journey around the world, and I'm going to tell you about shapefiles, using shapefiles in AnyLogic. And we'll come to what shapefiles are in a bit. We'll start with a little introduction in the US. We're going to fly over to South America. I will tell you what shapefiles are and what you can do with them. Long old flight over to Asia, where I'm going to tell you how to actually use shapefiles in AnyLogic and how to get your agents to interact with shapefiles. And we're going to conclude with 3 worked examples from my professional life, basically. So let's start. First, a little bit about myself. So I work for a company in London called Decision Lab, and we basically use AnyLogic for all kinds of stuff. We're a good bunch of people from the OR background and simulation modeling background. Some of you might know Dave Buxton, who's my boss, and he's also the UK distributor. And we've got a nice client base, lots of them in the defense and aerospace sector, like Rolls-Royce, the Ministry of Defense. We've done some healthcare modeling for GlaxoSmithKline. Utility companies, and then there's Thorntons. That is a UK chocolates manufacturer, which is a bit random for us, but it was good because we got chocolates in our team meetings. That was brilliant. Right. So we've heard the term GIS a lot at this conference. It actually stands for Geographical Information Systems, and it's horribly non-informative term. I just call it maps in computers. That's so much simpler, and everybody knows what that means, basically. So what is GIS, actually? Well, basically, this is GIS. So this is just a simple Google Maps screenshot. Maps in a computer, and you can do something with that map because it's digital. So you can compute a route in Google Maps very easily. It can tell you where traffic is. It can tell you how long it takes, for example. So that's quite cool. The concept behind GIS is basically that everything is layered. So down here you've got the real world, and it's kind of complicated, and everything is connected to everything else. In computers, you try to recreate that by a layering approach. So you've got a street layer that only contains all the streets. On top of that, you might put an elevation layer, so you know at which height every point in the space is. And at the very top, we've got like a customers layer or whatever. That would map to agents in AnyLogic. So you want your agents to actually live in that map and do stuff with that map, just like we've seen yesterday. So that's really cool. So now we know that agents and GIS in AnyLogic, they work together, and they finally got married and like each other. Except that there's a slight problem, and this is what my talk is about, that the current capability is great, but there's still a problem, and that problem is in South America, and that's shapefiles. Shapefiles are basically an industry standard widely used to actually save geographical data. So it has been introduced, I don't know, in the 1990s or something. It's a very old standard from a big geographics company called SV. And what it is, well, this is a screenshot of OpenStreetMap. Anybody know what OpenStreetMap is? Have seen that before? It's basically a website. It's basically Wikipedia for maps. So it's a worldwide map, and all that has been edited by volunteers in their free time, saying this route or road actually goes from there to there, and this is where I live, and this is my address, and all that stuff. And it really works like Wikipedia. Everybody can edit it, and it's a highly detailed map of the world. In many places, it has much, much more detail than Google Maps ever will have, because it's private people basically mapping their own neighborhood. What you can do with that is you can actually download that from the web, from OpenStreetMap, for free as a shapefile, in a shapefile format. And AnyLogic does support shapefiles, so you can load that into your GIS map. But what it does is displaying it on top. It's just displaying it. It's just showing your shapefile. By default, you cannot really get your agents to interact with those shapes, which is what my talk is about. So here we see another shapefile. That's from my PhD research. So you see lots of dots. Anybody got an idea what these dots might represent? This is the Isle of Wight in the UK. And it's an area of lots of leisure activity in those waters. This is actually where Titanic left, by the way. Anyway, these dots represent incidents, search and rescue incidents. So people drowning, people getting lost at sea, problems on boats and all that over the course of a year. And you can see they've got different colors. And this is the magic of shapefiles. You not only have geographical data or objects, you actually can assign characteristics to them. In this case, just color, but it could be anything. This is another shapefile, a very generic, simple one, just showing you again the concept of a shapefile is really just points in space. You can connect them to form an area, you can connect them to form a line, or you can just keep them separate as points. And again, assign characteristics like saying this is green and this is blue. Now, as I said, shapefiles, it's a very old file format. So when I talk about a shapefile, we're actually talking about 3 files, unfortunately. Some shapefiles consist of 10 different files, but that's too complicated. There are 3 basic file types. So the main one is the can you see that? SHP file. If I move my mouse, this is gone. So .shp file, they actually store the geometry of your shapes. So for each point, it stores a latitude and longitude, basically. Then you've got an shx file, which puts an index on those things, so you can retrieve them easily. And here is where the magic happens. This is a dbf attribute file. This is where you can assign characteristics to your geometry, to your shapes in space. So from this, if you just saw those shapes, you wouldn't know what they are. But if you read their characteristics, you can see they represent lakes, and they have different depth. So that's quite cool. And this you cannot get from Google Maps. You can't ask Google Maps like Nikolai did yesterday, send my agents to all lakes that are deeper than 25 meters. That is the magic of shapefiles, basically. Shapefiles are very common. You can find millions of them on the web for free. Quality varies. Some of them are really bad. Some of them are quite good. You can also buy shapefiles. And as I said, you can download them from OpenStreetMap. So you got very detailed stuff. And the OpenStreetMap shapefiles, they've got lots of characteristics. So for a normal road, you'd get tens of different characteristics, like the number of lanes or the speed limit or anything. So it's very, very powerful. Now, the problem is, so far, as I said, you could only display those things. And this talk is about how you can actually get your agents to work with those shapefiles. So this is pretty much half of my PhD work done. I spent a lot of time trying to figure out a way to do this. And I talked to some people at this conference. Turns out I wasn't the only one. And several people have found different approaches or similar approaches. So this is just one approach of how to get your agents to use shapefiles. So I'll switch to AnyLogic. This is not the model I want. 1 second. I want this one. So we've got our GIS object, and I've loaded 2 shapefiles in here. One of them is the map of the world, quite simple, just the borders, and the other one on top is this red layer of roads, high, what's it called, motorway network of Northern America. Now, as I said, you could only display that in AnyLogic, but what you actually want to do is something like that you actually click on a road and sort of you've got an interactive way of, accessing this data. And not only that, but how do you, let's stick with that for the moment. So just click on an object and it sort of lights up. How do you do that? It's unfortunately through a bit of coding, and I'm just going to show you the basics of it. I'm not going to go into any detail, but here I've got a little function, DrawVotes from click. So when I click on the map, just like I did, I call this function, and I pass it the longitude and latitude of where I just clicked. What I then do after some variables is I'm accessing the map, I'm using the function getLayers, and that basically returns an array of all the shapefiles, so in this case 2, that I've loaded into this map. I'm looping through each of those shapefiles, and I'm getting all the shapes, so this is what this piece of code is doing, all the shapes from this shapefile. And then again, I'm going one level deeper, and I'm looping through all my shapes, and I'm actually getting the shape, and there's some complications here, which we don't need to worry about now. But anyway, I will access my shape, and if it is a shape, I'm basically calling a function called getLatLongArray, and that's another array of all the latitudes and longitudes of my shape that I'm currently at. So for each point, I get the latitude and longitude. Now what I then do is I call a function called drawPoints, and that is fairly simple, and it's up here, much less intimidating. And I pass it that array of latitudes and longitudes. I've got a little polyline here. And what I'm doing is that I'm setting the number of points. So in this polyline, there are 5 points. I'm setting this number to the number of points of my shape. And quite simply after that, I'm looping through each point of my shape, and I'm putting the coordinates of this point to the coordinates that I've got for my point from the shape. So this is the magic that basically makes this line appear. It's a polyline on top of your GIS map. And I wouldn't recommend polylines with AnyLogic 7.1. You've got the GIS lines, which are probably much more efficient. And if you draw them and connect them together, you can actually have a network of your agents, so they can actually move through a network. So this is just for demonstration purposes, really. So the next thing is, if I click this button, I will ask a little agent to actually go to somewhere down here on the ocean, but follow that road. So that's quite simply done. So I've got a little airplane flying, and it's actually flying along that road and then goes to its final destination. And now you might say, well, this is exactly what we've done yesterday, but in a much better way, and this is really crap, and you're absolutely right. The point is, what you can do with this is that you can tell the airplane to access characteristics about this road, and you can say, fly along this road at a given speed that I tell you, or do any other kind of stuff based on the characteristics of this road. you could say that it should only fly along roads with more than 4 lanes to, I don't know, observe the road or something. And this is not possible with accessing Google Maps. And the other thing of the how-tos I want to talk about is how do you get your agent to access those characteristics? And it would be awfully nice if you would be able to actually use an SQL kind of statement to get into your DBF shapefile and say, get me all shapes that have lanes that have more than 4 lanes or something like that. I, in my PhD, wasn't able to achieve that. If anybody knows how to do that, do let me know. I had to come up with a very crappy workaround, which is basically that I created a separate database table that maps to all my shapes index-wise. So for each shape, I know an index. So this road might have index 0. So in my external database, I will set up an entry with index 0, and I will add my characteristics there. So I will say this road should be driven at 40 miles per hour or something. When I start my model on startup, I create a new Java class like this one, and this one basically pulls the data in, and then on startup merges it with the latitude and longitude coordinates from my shapefile. So for each point in my shapefile, I know where it is, and I've got my characteristics combined with that. Does that roughly make sense? So I'm merging 2 things from 2 different strands. I'm getting my space data from the shapefile, and I'm getting my characteristics from a separate database. I'm sure it's possible to query the DBFs, but I wasn't able to do that. And there are always hundreds of ways to achieve what we want with AnyLogic, so this is one way. Right, so let's see what this looks like in practice. Oops. Present. So some examples in Europe. Let's move to Rotterdam, the port of Rotterdam in Holland. We've seen yesterday it's about the 11th largest port in the world, and it's very, very big. I've been there. And we've been asked by the Port of Rotterdam Authority, you guys, we really need to know what's going on in our harbor security-wise. Lots of dodgy things happen on top of those container ships, and captains sort of making wastewater, dumping wastewater where they shouldn't do stuff. And, you know, it's sort of a dodgy area, harbor area. And what happens in reality if they suspect something suspicious on a ship? They will go out with a little police vessel, and they go to that huge container ship, and then they're in front of that container ship, and they're like, I have no idea what's going on up there, because they can't see it. So their thought was, could we use unmanned aircrafts, drones, actually flying or hovering above those ships and give us video images of what's going on? Good idea. So we were investigating that. And it looks like that. So what we did was we built a simulation model in AnyLogic using shapefiles. And here we can see the geography. That's basically Rotterdam Harbor. The background shapefile is very coarse, so this is actually water. What Rotterdam Harbor really looks like is that's a map of the harbor. So it sort of goes inwards, and this is the River Rhine. Yeah, come on. So we recreated the operations of a possible UAV. And you see a line here that is basically a patrol that the UAV should be flying each day. And you see lots of dots out here. These are offshore anchorage positions of ships that are not allowed in the harbor and need to wait outside. And you need to check those from time to time. And up here, we've got a little blue guy, and this is basically a distress call. Somebody is sort of missed or drowning or something. And our UAV is now flying out to this guy and trying to search for him. In the future, he's now basically patrolling and stopping at specific points. And all those characteristics of how long to stop, how fast to fly, how long to search for somebody, this is all from the shapefile, or in this case, from an external database, but it's also in the shapefile. Another example, also in Europe, brings us to southern UK waters. Search and rescue. If somebody drowns or is lost at sea, what usually happens is that boats are sent out, and they're following some patterns, trying to search for this person. And if it's really serious, they also send out a helicopter. Now, boats are very slow. Helicopters are extremely expensive to operate. So there's lots of potential to improve the service while also reducing cost in this area, using, again, unmanned aircraft. So it was a very similar task that we were asked to do. And I'll show you what it looks like. Quickly set up the model. Yep. Come on. Right, so you'll recognize the map from earlier, I hope. So we've got our lots of incidences that happen over the course of a year. And if I fast forward a little bit, let's wait for a second. We've got sort of lifeboat stations dotted around the area and some lifeboats, and we've got a UAV trying to help in the search operation. So if I fast forward, we will see that there's some search going on for a person there. The UAV is searching, the boat is searching, they've got little view areas. But again, the data that we drew from the shapefile is what type of incident is this guy? Is this just a head in the water, swimming and trying to swim towards land? Then it's really hard to find, and you don't really know where he exactly is. Or is this a huge tanker that has got problems, and it's really easy to find, and you're pretty certain where he actually is. So these characteristics you can then draw from a shapefile. My final point is really it is extremely useful to use maps, so do check out the default new features, which are awesome. But if you want to get into more detail on shapefiles, do remember this talk. It is possible to tap into the power of shapefiles with AnyLogic. So that's all. Thanks a lot.